So one of the things that you want to be able to do, of course, is you want to be able to reconfigure your Windows options so that you can see you can adjust your panels accordingly to see whatever it is that you want to see. There's some default screen settings that you can select from that are already built in. So if you come up here to where it says default at the top header of the 3D window, there'll be several options that you can choose, including like animation, which actually gives you a number of windows that are pertinent to 3D animation, compositing, game logic, and so forth. And I'm just going to, for today, just stick to the default, but we can make some adjustments to this if we'd like. So one of the ways to split a screen or to merge a screen are to grab these little hashes up here in the corner of the screen. You see these little hashes, and when you bring your cursor over it, it usually turns to like a plus sign. And so if we do that and then just left click and then start dragging, we can actually split our window into two scenes, or two windows, and then at that point we can choose to make our window anything that we want. We can choose any other type of window that we find suitable. I'm going to keep it in the 3D window. And then if we want to merge back, we just click on one of the kind of windows that's flush. You need two windows that are flush with each other, and then you can drag and decide which one you want to merge into the other one. So we'll merge that back. Of course, you can do this with vertical splitting or horizontal splitting, and the same thing I just mentioned applies. Okay. Yeah. Sure. So you're working in Blender 2.4?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to be working in 2.5 today.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And where do I get that?
Blender.org.
Excellent.
Okay. So, okay, is everyone with me so far, conceptually at least? Okay. So, before I go into manipulating objects in the 3D scene, I just want to get you the kind of satisfying feeling of creating your first rendered image in Blender. It's actually really easy. If you come over here to the under the render panel, there's a little button on the right that says image. What that means is that you're going to be rendering an image. So with the default settings set up, you can click on image, and what it should do is create your first rendered image. So it actually turns the 3D window into what's called the UV image editor, which allows you to manipulate images which can then be used to save or process or even map onto other surfaces of 3D objects. Okay. So if we actually want to go ahead and save this, say on our desktop, we come down to the image panel, the image file option in the bottom of the panel, and we can click on Save As. And you can choose your favorite location on your computer. I'll choose desktop. I'll just leave it as untitled. Save as. And then when we open up our desktop, we should see our first rendered image. OK. One thing I want to point out that I haven't really mentioned yet is I'm actually able to move this top panel. And I'm doing that just by scrolling. If you have some sort of scroll function on the MacBook Pro, which I use as a trackpad option, allows you to drag two fingers and scroll. If you can't do that, you might be able to hit Alt, left click, and then you should be able to move this around. And then you should be able to see all the way in the right this toggle current window to full screen, and that basically just makes Blender take up your entire screen space so that nothing else is getting in your way. Okay, so that's how to render our first image. I'm just going to come back to the 3D view. I should also point out that there's a couple other ways to actually render. So the render image button is one of the, of course, most straightforward and easiest ways to do it. You can also come up to the render file option at the top of the 3D. In this, this is actually its own window called Info, and all it is a bar. But if you have the Info window open, then you can just come to render image under here, and the shortcut key is F12. Okay. So yeah, so now let's dive into the 3D scene and how we can actually start working with the objects, manipulating them, adding them to the scene, getting into the real meat of the interesting stuff. So the basic default Blender function of the left click in the 3D window is to actually place the cursor. If we right click, or if you're on a Mac, you can do Command left click or Control left click. Either of those should work. You can select the different objects that are actually in your scene. And now, one thing that's really critical to get used to in 3D graphics, especially if you're only familiar with 2D graphics, is to be able to get the appropriate perspective. And so there's a number of things that we can quickly do to change our perspective and give us a better viewpoint from what we're looking at. And you'll soon realize that when you start working in 3D, of course, as Tamara Munzner likes to point out, our eyes can only see in 2.05D. So, really, our eyes look at a two-dimensional image, but we're trying to manipulate three-dimensional objects. So we really have to get used to going back and forth between different perspectives. And so what I'd like to mention here is that now that we have the Emulate Numpad option selected under the user preferences, there's a number of different ways we can view the scene. So if I actually press the 1 key along the top of the keyboard, we actually change our perspective to the front perspective, as they show you here. If you hit the number 3 key, you get the right perspective. If you hit 7, you get the top perspective. And once you're there, you can actually do manipulations and look at everything from an orthogonal perspective. So these are very useful. The reason that it smoothly glides between these different positions is because of that smooth view option I showed you earlier. When you set it to 1,000, it makes it very slick and smooth to transition between the different viewpoints. Now, to just manipulate the scene by hand and start orbiting and moving the scene around, what you want to do is, if you have a middle mouse button, click that and drag. If you do not have a middle mouse button and you have the Emulate 3-button mouse option selected in the user preferences, you want to click Alt and then left click, and this will give you the option to start rotating and orbiting around your scene. Okay? And then at any point, if you'd like to just transition back into one of those orthogonal perspectives, front, side, or top, you can hit the 1 key, the 3, or the 7. And the smooth view option, again, gives you this continuity that helps you not get so disoriented when you're switching perspectives. So Alt left click or middle mouse button will allow you to orbit. Now, that's one of there's orbiting, panning, and zooming are essentially the 3 basic controls for controlling your view that you would actively do in your 3D scene. So that was orbiting. The second one is panning. And so you can either hit Shift middle mouse button or Shift Alt left mouse button, click and drag. And then you should be able to pan, which is essentially move the scene left down, and up and right based on the perspective that you currently have. Okay. And then, of course, there's zooming. So for zoom, you should be able to do Control middle mouse button or Control Alt left mouse button, click, and then you can drag. And if you usually drag it, if you're dragging down with your mouse, you actually pull it towards you. If you push it up, you're kind of pushing it away from you. I tend to actually prefer to use the scrolling option. So if you have, if your computer or your laptop or mouse affords you the ability to scroll with a scrolling wheel, or with a MacBook Pro trackpad, you use like 2 fingers, and you can scroll like you would on a web page or in a document. You can actually just zoom in and out of your scene. So we've got, as I mentioned, we've got orbiting, panning, and zooming. And again, we've got the front view, the right perspective view, and the top perspective view. And then we can always just keep manipulating. Now, one really important point about actually manipulating your view in 3D space is that it's really essential to be able to control what the center of your orbiting is. So right now, you'll notice that more or less the cube is at the center of view. So the shortcut key that we worked on before, center view to cursor, something I use all the time. And so if you can three-dimensionally place your cursor where you want to center your view, you can change your perspective to allow you to center the orbiting around that center point. So we have a cursor here, and I'm going to hit, because I set it in my user preferences, I'm going to hit Control dot. You could do Control numpad dot if you have a numpad. And now this will actually place the cursor at the center point of your orbiting. You'll actually find a lot of times that maybe you're way zoomed into something and you want to look at it, and then you start orbiting, and you'll find that your center of orbit's way off. And so when you try moving around, you get everything just flies around. And so that's an easy thing to get disoriented by, especially for new users. So again, if you hit Control numpad period, or just Control period if you set it in your user preferences, as I showed you earlier, we can change our perspective to the cursor. We can center the view to the cursor. One quick and easy option is to actually hit Shift-C. And what this does is it actually forces the cursor to the origin, the three-dimensional Cartesian coordinate origin. So the cursor pops there, and then again hit Control dot, and we'll center our view to the origin of the entire 3D scene. Okay.